So, what voices do you like? What voices do you really not like? What voices sound like somebody rubbing their fingernails on a blackboard and you just want that sound to go away? Well, Chapter 9, Nonverbal Students, is on vocalics, which is the voice. And let's just remember that nonverbally, we are talking about the sounds that the voice can make. We're not talking about the words you choose. We're talking about how you say things, words and non-words, the sound of your voice. And it is a powerful, powerful nonverbal cue. So when we study voices, we call it paralanguage or we call it vocalics, okay? So it's called different things. It's very important as a nonverbal cue. You will also be thrilled when you realize what all the voice can do. You've been speaking your whole life. Once you figured it out and figured out you could make a bunch of sounds, and probably your first sound was a cry or a scream or a gurgle or something. But you have amazing mechanism. The voice is an amazing mechanism when you realize what all it can do. For example, take a simple mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How you doing? Mm-hmm. You doing okay? Mm-hmm. You doing okay? Mm-mm. Mm-mm. You doing okay? Okay, so I've conveyed a bunch of different responses without using a single word. I just use my voice. What is it inside there that goes, mm-hmm, or goes, mm-mm? Well, it's kind of amazing. You can tell. This is like my favorite chapter in the whole book, and I get goofy and giddy about this, and I'll try not to belabor it and talk about the most important things. When we get to about page 303, there is a drawing, a production of the voice. You're not going to be held responsible for knowing what the larynx is or what the pharynx is or how many sinus cavities do I have. I just put that in there. There it is. I just put that drawing in this book to show you how involved voice production is. If you've ever taken a class in voice, like voice and diction is a class the theater people offer, speech people do too. It's or if you ever taken voice lessons, like singing lessons, you realize that production of voice is very complicated and it involves many different organs. It involves our lungs, it involves our diaphragms, it involves the abdomen and the way we are able to support air and push air out through our sinuses, our cavities, through our mouths and our throats. It is a complicated process and involves multiple parts of the body just to produce sound. So take a look at that drawing on 303 and you can marvel at how amazing those structures are that enable us to produce our voices, and our voices are very important. We start with vocal properties on page 304. There are 3 of those that we cover: pitch, rate, and volume. Pitch is the falling or rising tone of the voice. Pitch is very important. Men typically have more pitches at their disposal. Their voices start lower than most women and can go quite a bit high into what we call a falsetto voice. Probably when you were going through puberty, guys, in middle age, middle school, or whatever, your voice flipped into falsetto because it was trying to deepen. Your hormones were going nuts. Hey, hormones drive so much of our voices. Breathing does as well. But our hormones are very connected to our voices. This is how you can tell if you're on the phone with a small child or with an elderly person, because the hormones are what connect to our being able to produce sound and different pitches. So men actually have more pitches at their disposal. Sometimes they flip when you're going through puberty and they're like, ah, and your voice will kind of like try and be on one pitch and then it'll flip into something else kind of weird. That could be quite embarrassing when you're younger. Women's voices are a little bit different because of our particular makeup of hormones. Our voices start low, higher and go up pretty high, depending on, just the structures and what you've got. There are some things about the voices that are physiological that can't be fixed, can't be changed. But then there's a lot about the voice that can change. It's very malleable, and so you can change it to your advantage. You can use it, and we do use it for all kinds of things, to convey emotions and attitudes, to help our verbal message. How do you convey sarcasm if not for the voice? If you say, well, you look great today. Or you say, you look great today. Yes, the facial expressions help, but the voice and the shift in pitch is what conveys irony, sarcasm, humor. So much humor depends on our voices, right? So pitch is the rising and the falling. Typically, we have decided that using a lot of pitches is somehow feminine. American culture has decided this, and other cultures around the world. That's kind of crazy because men actually have more pitches at their disposal, but they are conditioned maybe not to use them because that's a feminine thing. They role model after their fathers and brothers and uncles and grandparents, and those men may have used very few pitches. So sometimes you'll see two women who haven't seen each other over like summer break, college students, and they see each other and they're like, "Oh my God, how are you, old girlfriend? You look good. You lost some weight. Oh my God." Okay, so they're like all over the place. Two guys haven't seen each other this summer. They're like, "Hey, dude, good to see you. How you doing? Good. Good summer? Good." Their pitches are like, and the women are all over the place. Some of this, y'all, relates to the mothering role. The fact that women are the baby birthers and many times the baby nurturers, and we still do more of that than men do, than fathers do. They're participating more, but there's still inordinately more amount of time spent with children on the women's part. And so if you read to children, you have to do the voices. And so a lot of times, mothers will try to also encourage their children to learn sound and to speak, and so they will use a lot of pitches. And so they'll read to them and be very animated with their faces and their voices. And men may struggle with this a little bit. They may not be as used to it. And so that's why there's some pitch variation between the sexes. Okay, here is an important term, your fundamental frequency. Your fundamental frequency is kind of the pitch where your voice kind of hangs out. And it's mostly when you say, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's your average pitch. That's your go-to pitch. And you vary up and down a lot or a little based on that fundamental frequency. It's where your voice kind of settles, where it kind of hangs out. There's some other terms in this. Look at intonation. There's some things in there. I want to move on a little bit to speech rate. Speech rate is interesting because it's so affected by our emotions. When we get excited or really happy, we may speed up our speech rate. When we get down or sad or tired or we don't feel well, we may slow down our rate. This is one of those things like pitch that is changeable, that we can work with. It's a tool that we use to convey our message, how quickly or how slowly we speak. There are some indications that people in the southern states of the United States speak at a slower rate than people in the northern climes. Possible. This may even out a lot because people are moving all across the country, and so maybe there's not as much connection to rate as there used to be with the region of the country. Then the third property is volume, which is another thing that you can use to your benefit. Sometimes people are very, very loud, and then they pull back, and maybe they get soft to a whisper because they want to draw attention to something. So we might drop the pitch, slow down the rate, and decrease our volume just for dramatic effect. So it's another thing that the voice can do. When we get to about pages, okay, so we're on volume. Oh, there's another part here, articulation and pronunciation. Real quickly, articulation is how clearly you speak something. Pronunciation is, do you pronounce something correctly? Do you say it correctly? So I might say, for dinner tonight, we're going to have paschetti. Well, I articulated paschetti correctly, clearly, but I didn't pronounce spaghetti correctly. So one is clear, clarity of how you speak. The other one is, are you using the conventional, correct pronunciation? When I was in Australia, it used to drive me crazy because people would add a whole syllable to the word aluminum. They call it aluminium, like condominium. Aluminium. I was like, aluminium? I'm like, this is a 4-syllable word. Aluminum. And you put a fifth one in there. Aluminium. I was like, that made me nuts. So pronunciations do vary across cultures. That's the one I hung on to the most when I was in Australia. I'm like, Wow, that's interesting. So now we move on to vocal qualities. These are sort of changeable. It takes work to fix these things. Breathiness is the first one. Happy birthday to you. Okay, there's a picture of Marilyn Monroe on page 312 because she's kind of the epitome of the breathy voice. You can fix that. You can use it to great effect. Marilyn did. Raspiness is another one, that hoarse, raspy thing. Sometimes people have raspy voices because there is damage to the vocal folds. Some cheerleaders have this happen, or where you have abused the voice, and so you have a raspy quality. Uh, you can get that fixed. Don't let anybody ever cut on your vocal cords. That is a scary thing. And there are those operations out there to kind of correct some of these things, but they're very scary. Okay, and then the last one is nasality. We have Fran Drescher's picture on page 313. That woman on Friends that had the. Okay, so that is a closing off of the nasal passages. That's air not coming in as much and shutting it off so you kind of sound nasal. It's very irritating. Most of us hate those kind of voices. So you can work with a speech therapist to kind of open up that and to reduce the nasality in your voice if you want to. Page 314 to 315, I will end here. Vocalizations. These are all the things we do with our voices, but they're not really words. Okay, so this is a sneeze, the sounds you make when you cry. Maybe you have a certain kind of a laugh, like a okay, or maybe you do that whole laugh where you go, and nothing comes out. There's no sound. Maybe you have several different laughs. You got to giggle. Maybe you have a big old belly laugh. I'm not going to do one of those. Y'all know what those sounds like. But, snoring, laughing, crying, yawning, all those kind of things are vocalizations that, again, help us convey messages to people and convey our personalities. Okay? Going to stop there. Pick it up again after the vocalization section. Thank you. Bye.